Meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, March 13th at 7:30 p.m. in the Board of Education meeting room. I hope everyone had a happy, healthy vacation and is well rested and ready to start. Thank you for those that could make it tonight. We had a number of situations, but we are here. This is it. No, he's not here either. What I will touch on first is some of the conversations on regionalization that have been going on. The board's position on this is clear, has been clear. We will testify on Friday in front of the Education Committee. What the Board of Education will not do is engage in kind of the mudslinging that's going on this issue. This board, people should be very proud of, has kept children at the forefront. We are a policy and finance board, and we have kept the effects of children and the effects on the finances of our town forefront on this issue. We have gone through the process appropriately, bipartisanly, and we will continue to do so. So we certainly hope the community can be proud of that. I am certainly proud of all the work this board has done, keeping themselves abreast. But bless you. Our first goal will be children, and it will continue to be children. So tune in if you so choose to like public access television on Friday. But our position remains clear, and we will continue down those steps. With that, I will open it up to public comment. Nobody? All right. We'll move forward to the superintendent's report. Dr. Landon?
Quietly.
We like that. We'll move on to the approval of minutes. It is requested that the board approve the following minutes. Minutes of the special meeting held on Wednesday, February 13th, 2019. May I have a motion? Mr. Burke, and a second. Mr. Maroney, all in favor? That is unanimous with the attendees.
Okay, so we have Burke, Deline, McNamara, Hoffman, Stein. Okay.
Great. And we will go right in. Are there any board committee reports this evening? Mr. Deneen.
We did have a meeting of the Oxridge Building Committee on Friday, February 15th. The main thing that we did at that meeting was move forward with requesting a survey of the Oxridge property. So that has begun. That's in process right now. There is another meeting scheduled for this Friday, March 1st at Town Hall Room 206.
Okay, what time? Just so people know.
7:30 a.m.
All right, well, we wish you luck on that endeavor, and we are excited to watch your progress.
Thank you.
Any other board committee reports? Seeing none, we will move right on to presentations and discussion. First up is a curricula update, mathematics and science, K through 12. Dr. De Silva.
So tonight I introduced Felicia Bellows, Department Chair 612 Mathematics, alongside Linda Johnson, who serves as the Elementary Director of Mathematics and Science, so you'll hear from her twice tonight. As part of our goal to ensure that the public and the Board of Education is updated with the curriculum initiatives and work that is happening across our classrooms K-12, we have invited our department chairs along with our directors to come share out some of the work that has been happening this school year. So we'll start off with both Felicia and Linda on elementary updates, secondary updates, and some of the work that they'll continue to study or next steps.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. Good evening, Ms. Achman, Dr. Landon, members of the board. I am very excited to be here this evening to share an update on our K-5 math program. This is the first year of a 3-year implementation plan of a new primary resource, Math in Focus, in grades K, 1, and 2. As you may remember, and for the benefit of the members of the board who are new this year, our program that we've been using for a good number of years in Darien was Turk Investigations, and we've transitioned to Math in Focus, which is a comprehensive program that relies on pedagogy, curriculum, and assessment techniques from Singapore. You may often hear it referred to as Singapore Math. It's important to note that we didn't change our curriculum. However, we have had to revise our scope and sequence and curriculum guides to align with the new resources of this program. Overall, the implementation has been successful as a result of the hard work and commitment on the part of our teachers and our students. Teachers have embraced the non-negotiable instructional strategies, concrete, pictorial, abstract, metacognition, and visualization that I shared with you last year. These techniques have complemented the 3 elements of rigor that we have embraced in our district for a good number of years, those being conceptual understanding, computational fluency, and problem solving. We have provided quite a bit of professional development devoted to these instructional practices this year in various forms. At the district level, we have devoted professional development days to lesson structure, instructional strategies, and assessment techniques, which all general education and special education teachers, along with administrators, attended. In fact, we devoted an additional half day to our special education teachers, all special education teachers, kindergarten through 5th grade, where they received additional professional development on instructional techniques for students who are receiving special education services. At the building level, we have professional learning communities taking place on a regular basis, during which teachers unpack chapters prior to teaching it. Our math specialists and I facilitate those meetings, along with pushing into our classrooms to provide model lessons or co-teaching experiences. We have also provided support for our parent community in various ways. For instance, the district math team and I have facilitated parent information sessions at the district and building levels. We have also developed a parent website, which is available on the district site as well as each elementary school homepage. I'm going to highlight parts of that website now. So this site is called Elementary Math, and again, it's located on the district and all of our school pages. The district math team and I have developed curriculum guides, we call them Curriculum at a Glance, that highlight the essential skills and concepts that are taught at each grade level. We also publish on a regular basis, maybe some of you have seen these, newsletters. So you can see this year we are focusing on those instructional strategies that are taking place in our classrooms. We feel that it's very important that our parents have a similar understanding about the practices as our teachers do. So we write a newsletter about one of the practices. And we've also provided resources for our parents and our students. So you can see here, I'll just highlight a few things. Our parents and our students now have access to all of the student ebooks, the resource books, the student workbooks, virtual manipulatives, through links on this site. They no longer need a special login code. They can access everything freely right there. And then we've also vetted some popular websites, apps, and games for students to use at home that complement our curriculum. So before we go back to our presentation, and I turn it over to Dr. Bellows, I would like to finish with an example of what the teaching and learning looks like in our classroom. I'm going to show you a very short video of a 2nd grader who is learning how to subtract within 1,000 with regrouping. He is subtracting across zeros using concrete, pictorial, abstract, metacognition, and visualization.
I'm going to cross out the 4 because now I have 3 tens. And then I'm just going to put a 1 here for 10 tens. And then I'm going to take a 10 away for 10 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now 10 minus 9 is 1. So now I have 1.
Gives you 100
So
back.
wait, cross this out for 9 tens. And
How awesome was he? So what you didn't get to see in here was after I turned off my phone, he said, "Oh no, wait a minute. I wasn't supposed to be taking it from the tens. I said the tens. It should be the hundreds." Right there is a perfect example of metacognition. That we have a second grader who could first give us all that thinking out loud. Math is thinking. He knew that process inside and out. Did you see him scoop up those 9 ones without even thinking about it? Because he knew he just needed 1 left in that ones place. And for him to recognize that he made a mistake in saying tens instead of hundreds, it really shows that he's thinking about his thinking. And that's the kind of math that we want to see in our classrooms. And again, on the hard work of our teachers and our students, they're committed to this process. I applaud them. And here's Felicia.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening and welcome. As you may remember, our current primary resource used in grades 6 through 8, which is Big Ideas Math, is set to expire at the end of the next school year. We have also just heard from Linda regarding the implementation of the new resource, Math in Focus, at the elementary level. In response to the timing of our current resource expiring, and given the changes that have taken place at the elementary level, we have put together a secondary level math research team. This team includes teachers, specialists, and administrators from all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. Our work as a team this year has been centered around the following essential questions. How can we facilitate the transition for students as they progress from the elementary to the secondary level? How can we support student growth as both independent and collaborative learners? And what pedagogy best supports deep conceptual understanding and metacognitive skills in student learners? So over the course of this school year, the team researched and completed a comprehensive study of math programs to determine the most appropriate programs to pilot. Part of this process included attending math awareness workshops and consulting with neighboring districts. 2 programs were selected to pilot this year, Math in Focus and Big Ideas Math, the newer version. The pilot is currently ongoing as we have an implementation plan that includes 1 unit from each grade level across 12 classrooms, and that's for grades 6 through 8. The units that were selected to pilot were aligned to our current curriculum to ensure that there was no interference with the current classroom instruction. And as a result, the pilot is going to take a little bit longer and go through to the end of May. Both resources have new digital platforms, with one soon to be released this spring. In addition to investigating a new primary resource used at the middle school, our team of teachers have worked to gain a better understanding of the transition for students as they progress from middle school to high school. Teachers in both schools have participated in learning rounds, observing middle school and high school classrooms in action. These rounds have been particularly helpful for teachers to gain insight into their experience of their students as they progress to the next level course, and or to gain perspective regarding the course that preceded their students' current class. We will continue to implement these learning rounds throughout grades 6 through 12, as it has created more opportunities for teachers to collaborate about their pedagogy and the differentiated strategies that work best to fit the needs of all students. And here's Linda, who's going to talk about next steps and continued work at the elementary level.
Sorry. At the elementary and secondary levels, we have ongoing structures to collect feedback from our teachers and our building administrators. For example, I meet with our grade level leaders and building principals on a regular basis, push into classrooms, and continue to meet with the district math research team that I put in place several years ago. In fact, as recent as a few weeks ago, the math team and I got back together to review the feedback and the experiences that we've had this year. And we have already started to revise our curriculum documents for next year based upon the experiences from this year. As part of our 3-year implementation plan that I mentioned earlier, grades 3 and 4 will have Math in Focus in place next year. Grade 5 will come on board the following school year, which will be 2020-2021. We have already started to plan for our current 3rd graders' transition to a new resource for the first time in the 4th grade. This year, this current school year in 3rd grade, we will integrate learning progressions, instructional practices, and language from Math in Focus in the last 2 units of the school year. Our teachers received professional development on the transition plan at the PD Day in February. We have also outlined supplemental lessons that our current 3rd graders might need at the beginning of 4th grade next year to ensure that those students, our students, have the prerequisite skills necessary to be successful in the opening chapters of 4th grade. These lessons will be reflected in our pacing guides. Professional development will continue next year. To further develop instructional practices, our K-1-2 teachers will take part in model lessons in host classrooms. And then our 3-4 teachers will receive professional development very similar to the model that we had in place this year, where we'll take advantage of our district days and study lesson structure, instructional practices, and assessment techniques. And here's Felicia to talk about secondary, continue to study.
So our plan moving forward into the next school year is to continue to study one more program, Illustrative Mathematics. This is a new open resource available on a digital platform, and we will complete a pilot of this program in the fall of 2019. The secondary math research team will continue to meet, collect feedback, and work throughout the next school year, and we plan to make a recommendation regarding the resource that would best meet the needs of our students and families in the district. So what is it that we're really looking for in a math program? Just as the elementary math research team had certain non-negotiables when they made a decision about Math in Focus, there are certain attributes that we are looking for in a primary resource. We're looking for balance between conceptual development, procedural fluency, and mathematical application, alignment to the Common Core state standards, strength of the instructional model, one that incorporates active student engagement that's usable and flexible for students and teachers, and one that's designed to engage diverse learners. While we have focused a significant amount of time studying resources for the middle school, there also has been considerable curriculum work completed at the high school level. We have created a digital resource for the math department to memorialize our current curriculum on a department website for faculty, and we now have a 6 through 12 webpage for parents. You're going to be hearing more about our work as department chairs in the spring when the department chairs return to present outcomes of our priorities for the school year. Thank you for your time, and we are now happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both very much. Board's comments and questions. Mrs. Stein.
I just had a question about, so did I hear you right? So Big Ideas expires at the end of this year? Or
No, next year.
Oh,
Next year.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
I heard that wrong.
Otherwise,
I heard
we'd be in
wrong.
trouble.
Sorry. Yes, because I'm like, how are we going to continue? Thank you.
Mr. Burke.
Thank you for the presentation. With regard to Math in Focus, how do the students or the parents determine when it's appropriate to use some of those resources at home? They seem fantastic, but how do they learn to do that at home?
So first of all, I introduced them to the parents who attended the parent information sessions at either the district or the building level that I mentioned earlier. And then it's really up to the teachers to promote how they want their students to use them on a regular basis or not. Teachers have the option to either post them on their Google site or navigate parents to the district site that I've created. They're really there as a resource to parents to look at how the strategies are taught that students are using on their homework. So for example, there's a student resource book that will step out the strategy. So for example, in grade 1, we have a strategy called Make 10 First. Step 1, ... Step 2, the student resource book will have that. So if parents want to see the strategy and the steps that we're teaching in school, they can access it through those books. But for the most part, it's really parent decision how much they want to navigate through those resources. Our philosophy as a district in terms of homework, math work happening at home is that students should be very, very familiar and comfortable, confident with the homework that is going home, that it truly should be a practice of what has happened in the classroom.
Mrs. McNamara.
Staying on that same point with the K-5, are there any other supplemental resources? We used to use Kathy Fosnot, or is that still part of it, and that was more than just a website, but not our primary, so could you talk briefly about that?
I'm happy to. So we no longer supplement our K-1-2 units with Kathy Fosno. The only other resource that we continue to use, other than Math and Focus, are the problem-solving tasks from exemplars, because we have found great success in terms of promoting student flexible thinking flexibly with these open-ended tasks. The digital platform that we still carry is Dreambox. We have that K-5. This year we are collecting feedback from our teachers, our students, how much it's being used, how effectively it's being used, and how well aligned it is with Math and Focus. Right now I can tell you that it is very well aligned with the Math and Focus program, but we'll have to make decisions on where we go with that.
To support that, okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the issue comes up with math tracking 6 through 12 and where we are, or is that part of what this group is looking at?
When you say tracking, are you talking about the whole progression for 6 through 12?
Yeah, we've heard at the board level maybe ideas of changing it, maybe not changing it, where kids enter into levels and that kind of sets them on certain paths.
That has never been the case since I've been in the district, and that's a very long time that students are never locked into a track.
So I think maybe what I'm asking is some of the testing for the classes, because I do think parents at times feel that there are tracks and then get their kids in class because they perceive it as a track.
They do perceive that, and I've been trying to work on that perception. For grades 5 to 6, I think there's a perception that if you're not in a certain course in grade 6, you may never take calculus your senior year, or you may never take multivariable calculus. And the truth is that there's so many times within the program from 6 through 12 where students can make a jump, move a level, and change their progression. What we focus on is when assessing the student at the appropriate time and seeing where they are at that moment in time. So if a student is not ready for pre-algebra in 6th grade, but they are ready for geometry in 8th grade, we are going to make that move and we are going to reassess those students. So it isn't a one-time thing from 5th to 6th grade. It's not 6th to 7th grade, and it's not 7th to 8th grade. It's throughout the 6th through 12, students do have the opportunity. I would say that it's a little restricted in 10th grade. After 10th grade, then your pathway is a little more set in stone. By 10th grade, if you're in Algebra 2, 11th grade pre-calculus, 12th grade calculus. They are more sequential at that point in time, and it's more difficult to jump a level. But 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, there's a lot of flexibility for changing levels. That is something we're considering as a team when we look at the new programs, because some programs are not flexible and they don't allow for that. But the current program that we're using and the way we have operated has always been open to reassessing, looking at where students are. And this past year, I'm probably talking too much, I'm sorry.
No,
This
no, I
past
think
year-
we hear it a lot, so
Yeah.
the more opportunities
Yeah.
I think that parents can hear,
Yeah.
there's
That there's
movement and
movement throughout.
reassessments if there's questions or concerns is
Yeah,
probably a good idea.
This year I am tracking the number of students that switched levels in 6th grade. So when they were placed from 5th to 6th, did they move up, did they move down? I think parents also think that students never move up, and when we see a child is bored or ready to make the move up, we certainly do that. And we do that very frequently. That's not what you tend to hear about. You hear about being locked into a track, which isn't the case. So that's something we're aware of, the two, though, and I don't want to lose that flexibility with any new program, because I think it's important. I think that's one of our strengths, is that we recognize where students are, and then we place them appropriately at any point in time, not just 5th to 6th grade. So.
Okay, other board questions? Mrs. McNamara?
Yeah, staying on the secondary, you mentioned you're looking at Math and Focus, the new version of Big Ideas, and then next year, the illustrative math. Will
Yeah.
that be a third? Or
That's a third
so
one
those
to
are third.
consider, because
Okay.
that's a newer one, and I went to a workshop at CES where there were a lot of our neighboring districts also
Okay.
there to hear about it, and so I think it's something we really should pilot and consider.
When do you expect to have a decision of those three?
After the pilot in the fall, so probably, I would say winter,
Winter.
January.
January.
I don't want to say for sure, though, in case there's something
Oh.
else happens.
Of course, I'm thinking the year ahead, if you
Yes.
envision any budgetary implications with any of these, do you see that tying, or is that not an issue?
Not for this coming school year. If anything, we would be predicting a placeholder like we did with Math and Focus
Okay.
for the following year.
Okay, no, I realize it's the following year that it expires, but if we
we
hear
would
in
have to-
January, we'll be.
We
In a
would have to
similar
plan for
way,
something.
I apologize, Felicia, that's okay. In a similar way that we did with Math and Focus,
okay.
we did put a placeholder in during the budget season, anticipating that we would be making a change naturally, depending if it went to Big Ideas, it may veer off this way in terms of cost versus a Math and Focus, but generally speaking, it's likely that we'll put a placeholder in our budget.
Okay, and they're all about the same, right?
That I don't know yet.
Okay.
Mr. Maroney?
Yeah, with the new rollout of Math and Focus, have you had any surprises or disappointments, or can you speak to those?
So not so much a surprise, but a challenge, and it's not a disappointment by any means. We anticipated that our second graders might have the greatest challenge to adopting Math and Focus. Foundational skills are K-1-2, and they didn't have that program in first grade, or some of the strategies. For example, I spoke earlier about Make 10 First. They didn't have that in first grade, but they definitely make 10 first when you're regrouping.
Right.
Our second grader made 10 first.
Right.
So I would say that's been probably the grade level that we've really had to focus the most on, and ensuring that our students have the prerequisite skills to be successful in second grade. You may remember last year, if you weren't here last year, I'll just remind us all, the program comes with a pre-assessment for each chapter. And the pre-assessment assesses prerequisite skills that are needed to be successful in the upcoming chapter. So we've really analyzed that data. Each, students take the assessment, we come back to a PLC, a grade level meeting, we look at that data, and we're able to target which skills certain students need. So if the majority of the class need those skills, it becomes a whole class lesson. If it's just a certain number of students and it's a small group, we differentiate in that way. So second grade is where we've really had the need to differentiate the most in terms of going back to some strategies and skills from first grade. Fortunately, we considered that, and we thought about that last summer when we made our pacing guides. and we purposely built in additional days into some of our chapters that we said, ooh, that might be a tough one. We're going to add some extra days there because we might need additional days to teach skills from the previous year.
Follow up to that.
Mr. Maroney?
You mentioned that the grade 3 and 4 is rolling out next year. So have those teachers been trained on the new Math and Focus program, or are those current second graders going to have new teachers who haven't been exposed to it as well
Right, that's what I'm worried.
in third grade?
Yeah,
Sure.
That's where I'm thinking too.
And that does come with having a roll-up, a 3-year transition plan or a implementation plan that's not all at once. But if you weigh out the pros and cons, if everyone has the program K-5 in 1 year and that eliminates a teacher being new to the program, we went the other side of having a cohort of students being new to it, 4th grade, along with a set of teachers being new to it. Some of the instructional strategies that are in Math and Focus, we've been implementing for a good number of years in our district. Again, if we reflect back on the past 2 years when I've been meeting with all of you, we've talked about that. And that was one of the primary reasons that we did like Math and Focus, because it had some of the instructional practices that we value as a district and we've been implementing. Concrete, pictorial, abstract, for example. So our 3rd and 4th grade teachers have some familiarity with those strategies, but they will definitely have a learning curve to go through. They will receive professional development at the beginning of the school year, our first district day, and possibly this spring push into some of our 2nd or 1st grade classrooms to visit the lessons and see what they look like, if we can manage that scheduling.
Yeah, I think that would be highly encouraged, at least from my point on that, as well as with the testing to track how they do versus the previous year, and then also the latter year to see how difficult that transition has been for specifically that grade.
Sure.
For me.
Any other board questions? Mrs. McNamara.
Staying with the K-5 and sort of the inverse of what we may be seeing in the upper school, another issue that I know I've heard is the differentiation and how to take those students in those younger years to the end of their ability. Can you talk a little bit about how you found the new program and differentiation, or just how you've seen that?
So just want to clarify, make sure I understand you correctly. For students, higher achieving students?
Higher achieving students.
Okay.
Or the spectrum, we'll say.
So, fortunately, and again, you may remember some of this from our presentation last year, the program has routine and non-routine word problems. And the non-routine word problems have really challenged a good number of our students, where it's not, oh, just read it easy peasy, 1, 2, 3, I know I have to add here. The way that the programs, or the problems, are posed, students really need to go through that thought process where we want them to be visualizing the math in their minds first, think about what the problem is telling you, what you know, and then choose a strategy to solve it.
So I guess, yes, so you're pleased with how it's meeting all levels in that age
Yes,
group.
very pleased, and also pleased with the computational fluency piece. Like the video of having our 2nd grader subtract across zeros through thousands, using strategies. That's a standard, that's an expectation that's been in our curriculum since we adopted the Common Core, but now we're giving our students many more experiences with those computational fluencies through this program.
Mr. Deneen.
Thank you for the presentation, as always. Could you talk a little bit, you talk about the implementation, you talk about professional development for our teachers, you talk about parent support and parent communication. How do we communicate to the students? I think at the upper middle school and the high school sometimes, we implement this new curriculum, or we implement different ways of teaching, but how are the teachers preparing or talking to the students about it? I think in some feedback I get sometimes, there are students that are at different stages in how they learn as we go through these curriculum changes. And, how do we make sure they understand what we're trying to do with the curriculum, and how are the teachers communicating to the students?
It's very, very important to make sure that our students understand the why, right? The relevance, why are you learning this? So part of our lesson structure, for sure, is the what and the why. this is what I'm teaching you today, and this is why. So that's, I talked about studying lesson structure. We've really emphasized with our teachers to tell the students, tell our little ones why you're learning what you're learning today, to bring that relevance into the classroom. And then as teachers model the skill and the strategy that they want our students to learn, they're using that metacognition, that think aloud, where they're bringing in the importance and why. Well, I'm using the base 10 blocks because it shows, and then that brings importance and communicating to students. And oftentimes you'll see teachers conferring with our mathematicians, just like we have a writing conference or a reading conference. We'll see our teachers sitting one-on-one or in a small group explaining again why students are learning what they're learning. An example is our second graders. We had many second graders who said, I can do this, I don't need the blocks, why do I have to use the blocks? Well, let me explain to you why you need to understand it through a concrete and then a pictorial representation.
All right. Mr. Maroney.
Sorry, one last one. I remember when you gave the presentation last year, Mrs. Haggerty Ross was concerned about you talked about the non-standard word problems, and Mrs. Haggerty Ross, I believe, was very concerned about the special education children having difficulty reading those word problems, and maybe their difficulty is in the reading and not the mathematics. And have we seen that, or have we been able to deal with that for those problems?
So a practice that we have in place, and not only for students with an IEP, but all of our students, and not only with Math in Focus, we've done this with our exemplars as well, because those are very rich in language, is that, first of all, anything can be read aloud to our students. And we have a practice in place, a protocol for scribing. So students can talk out loud. Teachers will write it. Going back to the CPA approach, putting those manipulatives into our students' hands, concrete, pictorial, abstract, so that they're acting out that word problem with a manipulative of some type. Or really, I've been working quite a bit with our teachers of special education on the importance of visualization. There is so much research out there about how our brains are made to picture math. We're born that way. So if we can teach our students to see the math in their brain, research tells us that they're going to build that deeper conceptual understanding. So whether you have an IEP or not, whether it's a routine or a non-routine word problem, what we want to do is go back to concrete, pictorial, abstract, and picture that math, visualize it.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? So it sounds wonderful that the special education teachers are getting kind of even an extra half day to kind of really be able to drive this home. But our general ed teachers, do we feel like they've gotten enough to recognize when a student who has needs or a student who's emerging is struggling with maybe some of the language base? They might not be an identified student and or just a concept. So I guess what I'm asking, for the training that our special education teachers are getting, do we feel like our general education teachers are getting an as robust PD so that they can identify issues with children and or how to assist with a child who's struggling?
I think the professional development plan that we put in place this year has been robust.
Okay.
I think there's still room to grow and go with it for sure. You heard me talk about next year we'd like to get model lessons taking place in a classroom by a staff developer who's taught various grade levels so teachers can see it from beginning to end. And that might be something that they focus in on when observing a model lesson. The last professional development session that we had a couple weeks ago was on assessment, where our general ed teachers, special ed teachers will receive a half-day session on assessment techniques. And it was solely devoted to assessing students, what to look for in their written assessments, what to listen for during a classroom, formative assessments, summative assessments. So I think we have a pretty good beginning, but there's still work to do there.
Okay. Any other board questions before we move on to science?
May I just add one thing? May I add one thing too?
Yes.
As a description for both general education students and special education students. And Linda spoke very eloquently last year about this. The design of the materials inherently tap into those modalities. If you look, we just looked at some of the assessments today, actually, at a meeting. They are robust in their visual presentation. The teacher, the general education teacher, reads it aloud to the class before they read it themselves. They also can sit one-on-one or two-on-one and go back and review that as they're going through it. So I think the design of the materials really support learners on many levels and many modalities.
Great, thank you. Mrs. McNamara.
Then, sort of that next group, could you talk a little bit about those students who now are receiving SRBI Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and how they are fitting into their teachers and the training they're receiving, the students, how is that working?
So our math specialists have attended all of the same PD as our general education teachers. And I'm so glad you asked, because what an incredible, incredible group of teachers. Our math specialists have embraced the new program. They are studying and learning on their own with me, either at their district meetings or on their own prep time. They are leading building-based professional learning communities with our classroom teachers. I mentioned unpacking the chapter before we go in and teach it. They're leading those meetings. So they are growing their understanding through the PD, but also on their own. So they are now very well versed in the instructional strategies that are in place in the classroom and are generalizing those strategies to the math resource room. So for example, if we have a second grader who's being pulled out for SRBI Tier 2 support 30 minutes and has a goal around subtracting with regrouping, our math specialists have the base 10 blocks out, have a place value chart out, going through those same steps on those strategies with the hope that our students will be able to generalize back into the classroom.
Maybe I'll ask a follow-up. Then for that individual who's servicing the entire building, how are they working with that third grader now? Because they're working now with 2 resources. How's that working?
They do it.
I can imagine it would be challenging because
it.
They're seeing...
And they also have their SRBI programs that they use.
Okay.
Scientifically research-based intervention programs that have targeted goals, explicit instruction that also complements the classroom programs.
Thank you both very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Just to add, as Dr. Bellows walks away, I think what tonight evidenced is the ability that we now have to articulate mathematics K through 12, and the collaboration that both Linda and Felicia have had not only with each other, but with their teachers. And so what you heard them both say, whether it was Linda's math research team at the elementary level and now Felicia's at the secondary level, you have cross grade level teachers. So you have elementary sitting with middle school, high school now at the middle school level, and middle school, elementary as well. And so with that, you really do have the ability to see how math is growing K-12. In addition to that, just because there was a large part of our conversation tonight on Math in Focus, there have been a lot of school districts that have implemented Math in Focus or Math in Focus, quote unquote, like programs, Singapore Math, some of which have done that successfully and some of which have failed miserably. A significant reason for that has been the implementation plan and the rollout and the amount of professional development that teachers receive, and in a way that is supportive to students. And so what Linda articulated tonight in thinking ahead for our third graders and what they'll need to receive in the spring, anticipating the challenges that they would have in the fall, is one of the many reasons in which this rollout has been incredibly successful here in Darien. We've been incredibly fortunate due to the thoughtfulness on the part of Linda Johnson, Felicia, and their entire team of interventionists, math interventionist specialists. So we're very, very fortunate in that regard. Okay, so transitioning.
We'll move on to science.
Moving on to science. So similar to our math update, we will update you on elementary science, secondary science, and the work that we're continuing to do, next steps and studying. You'll hear again from Christian somewhere in May and June, along with the department chairs and some of the other priorities that they have. But we'll transition over to elementary science, secondary science.
Thank you, Dr. Silva. Is this on? Great. Good evening, Ms. Ackman, Dr. Landon, and the board. Both Linda and I are very excited to be here tonight to give you an update on our K-12 science curriculum work. Before we get into this work, I wanted to give the board a quick overview of the next generation science standards as they have guided the work that we have been doing over the past couple years. The next generation science standard framework is based on 3 components of science learning, all of which are critical in linking practice to content. The NGSS, Next Generation Science Standards, focuses on developing the habits of mind and skills that scientists and engineers use in day-to-day life. As expectations shift for our students, teachers are no longer considered the one with all the answers. Instead, they're expected to guide students to draw their own conclusions based on evidence and reasoning. In November of 2015, the Connecticut State Board of Education adopted the Next Generation Science Standards, and the process of transition and implementation began in earnest. In Darien, this meant developing an understanding of what these standards meant for both our teachers and students from a K-12 perspective. As the understanding of the curricular and pedagogical shifts that were going to have to occur in the classroom grew, a curriculum development process was developed to address those needs. Tonight is an update on the Next Generation Science Standards, the curriculum process, and the work that has taken place since the adoption of these standards, and the next steps necessary to continue to develop curriculum and align instruction to the Next Generation Science Standards. As I mentioned previously, the foundations of the Next Generation Science Standards are the 3 dimensions that are intertwined into each of the performance expectations or standards. These dimensions are the science and engineering practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. They are on the slide on the screen behind you. The science and engineering practices describe the behaviors that scientists engage in as they investigate, build models, and theories about the natural world, and the key set of engineering practices that engineers use to design and create solutions to real-world problems. The use of the term practice in the NGSS is purposeful, as it emphasizes that scientists engage in investigation requires not only skill, but a knowledge that is specific to each of those practices, essentially meaning that students have to be taught how to engage in each of those practices. The disciplinary core ideas, which is the middle box, are a set of key science content that will be used to focus the K-12 science curriculum, instruction, and assessments. To be considered core content, the idea must have broad importance across multiple sciences or engineering disciplines, or be a key organizing concept of a single discipline. It must provide a foundation for understanding more complex ideas, be relevant to the student or society, and be teachable over multiple grades and at increasing levels of depth and sophistication. In addition, the Next Generation Science Standards focus on a limited number of core ideas in science and engineering, both within and across the disciplines. The choice to limit the core ideas was made to avoid the shallow coverage of a large number of ideas and to allow more time for teachers and students to explore each idea in greater depth. The 7 cross-cutting concepts have applications across content areas, science content areas, all science content areas under the science umbrella. As such, one can think of these concepts as a way of linking the different domains of science. The NGSS emphasizes the need for these concepts to be made explicit for students because they provide the foundation for connecting knowledge from various science fields into a coherent and scientifically based view of the world. Another important piece of the next generation science standards are called their learning progressions. The NGSS are built on the notion that learning is a developmental progression. The 3 dimensions are designed to help children continually build and revise on their knowledge and abilities, starting from their curiosity about what they see around them, as well as their initial conceptions about how the world works. Each of the 3 dimensions have learning progressions laid out to identify key content in the disciplinary core ideas, key skills in the practices, and connections in the cross-cutting concepts that need to be met at each grade level band in order to be prepared for the next step. For example, we have on the screen a K-12 learning progression for an Earth and Space Science disciplinary core idea. If you could read them, you would be able to note the complexity of the content that is necessary to meet this disciplinary core idea as the grade level bands increase. For example, the 3rd to 5th grade band students are expected to build models that show the effects of water on the surface of the earth, while at the 6th to 8th grade band, students are building on that prior knowledge to plan and carry out investigations to identify the effects of both large and small scale erosional processes. And Linda is going to discuss one of the key instructional processes that we use.
Thanks, Christian. Once again, good evening. I'm just as excited to talk about science as math. Dr. De Silva recently asked me, so Linda, which one is it? Do you like math more or science? Just when I say I love math so much, I love science so much. So here I go, science. Our science program follows an inquiry-based model that our district has valued for a good number of years. We've been investing in inquiry science way before I came on board. So if you take a look at the screen behind you, we have what we call an inquiry structure that follows 3 phases, during which students are applying the science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts to develop their understanding of the disciplinary core ideas that Christian just described. This instructional model begins with a real-world phenomenon that promotes students' critical thinking and problem solving. And it also provides them with a relevance for learning. Going back to that why, just as it's so important to tell our students why they're learning in math, it's equally as important to understand why they're learning in science. And that real-world phenomenon connects it to the why. So the process begins with learners exploring engaging materials to make observations and raise questions related to content goals. And those materials might be hands-on manipulatives or some form of multimedia resource. While students are making their notices and wonders, teachers have an opportunity to ask open-ended questions and listen in for student misconceptions. Because we know that oftentimes our students come to us with misconceptions in science that they may have learned from a video game, TV, their parents, a prior teacher. So we really make sure that we are listening in for student misconceptions that we would address in future lessons. The next phase of our instructional model is a focused investigation, during which learners plan and carry out an investigation or research a question that was raised during the inquiry starter. During the investigation, students develop a hypothesis, a materials list, and a procedure. And then they carry out that procedure or steps to follow. When completing the procedure during the investigation, students develop some type of data collection, and then they use that data collection to analyze their results. Those results are then shared with the rest of the class in the final phase of this instructional model, which we called shared understanding. And that's where students come together to share the results of their investigation. And it's a time for students to further develop their understanding of the content, build on each other's thinking, and then connect new learning back to the phenomenon that they started with. And that phenomenon might be a unit, driving phenomenon or a lesson level phenomenon. So next, we would like to share a brief overview of the process that we have established to develop our curriculum. In kindergarten through eighth grade, we have established grade-level curriculum teams of teachers who have studied the performance expectations and learning progressions in the 3 dimensions that Christian described earlier. Our units are aligned to the performance expectations in 4 science domains: earth and space science, physical science, life science, and engineering science. At the elementary level, we have accomplished the writing of all of our units, and they are being implemented this year. We are now in the process of collecting feedback on the lessons from our teachers. At the middle school level, multiple units for each grade level were developed last year and are being implemented this year. Similar work is continuing this year with the goal of all units being written by the end of this year and implemented next year. Teacher feedback will drive our future work in terms of lesson sequence, content, and instructional time. All of our units, kindergarten through 8th grade, follow a similar format. Christian and I felt it was very important to develop that coherence kindergarten through 8th grade in terms of the unit development and the unit structure. The units actually begin with an essential question that's connected back to the performance expectations in the unit. And that essential question is used to guide our students' thinking throughout the unit. Next, we've embedded a storyline in each unit. And the storyline is a coherent sequence of lessons driven by student or teacher questions. Again, we're going back to that inquiry process where students are developing their own notices and wonders and then taking their wonders and turning them into questions that can be investigated. So next, I would like to share an example of a unit at the elementary level, and then Christian will show one at the secondary level so you can see how the learning progresses through those grade level bands. So at the elementary level, we've bundled our performance expectations into 3 units. So each grade level has an earth science unit, life science unit, and physical science unit. The engineering performance expectations are integrated into specific units. Our digital curriculum is available to teachers on the K-5 Math Science site, where they can locate a variety of resources to implement lessons and assessments. So here we have grade 4. I'm going to highlight processes that shape the earth, which is an earth science unit. In 4th grade, students continue to learn about how the Earth's surface changes and how that surface can change quickly or slowly over a long period of time. So as you can see, here's our essential question: how can the Earth's surface change? Followed by a storyline. Each part or each bend has a little narrative so teachers can have a picture in their mind about what they'll be teaching and expectations for student learning. And then we have a learning sequence. The learning sequence has a lesson-driving question and/or phenomenon, followed by a multi-dimensional learning objective. And that's how we ensure that those 3 dimensions are integrated into the lessons. So I'm going to bring us back to the presentation where we have examples from our 4th grade curriculum. So here in the top photo, we have 4th graders carrying out a focused investigation based on a question that they raised during an inquiry starter. They made and used a model of a stream to learn about the concept of erosion while they were applying cause-effect relationships. And in the photos at the bottom, we have students from our high school who led our fourth graders in a science and engineering design lesson where they were planning, designing, and building a wind-resistant building. So before I turn it over to Christian, I would like to add how incredibly valuable it has been to have a partner developing this curriculum from the elementary all the way up to the secondary level. It really, truly is amazing to have a common vision. We have common experiences in our own professional development, and to see that vision come to life as we develop our units, either with our curriculum teams or when we go on our grade level walkthroughs, to actually see what we've written at the elementary and the secondary level come to life in our classrooms with our students. It's truly amazing. So here you go, Christian.
Thank you, Linda. And I can certainly second that excitement on my part, and to have Linda be able to walk through some of our curriculum development days as I'm working with our middle school teachers and sort of give us that perspective of what the students in the elementary schools are doing from a lesson-to-lesson point of view. We can look at her documents and see that alignment, but it has become very clear, especially this year, that as we become more aligned in our curriculum writing, that the alignment within the classroom is really starting to be highlighted. And to see that happen in such a short period of time is very exciting for me. So Linda's done a great job in helping me realize that with my teachers. At the middle school level, we've created a sequence of units and curricular documents utilizing the same process that Linda has highlighted. We've bundled performance expectations and that have been assigned to our 6th through 8th grade level band, so that there's at least one earth and space science unit, one life science unit, and one physical science unit that our students experience each of the 3 grade levels in middle school. Our curriculum documents are also housed on a website for our teachers, where they have access to our unit essential documents and the aforementioned storyline and learning sequence documents. So here we have, and I go to grade 7 because this is where we're highlighting. You see we have our units. We have a WAVES unit that focuses on physical science, weather and climate, and earth features, natural history. Our earth science units, matter and energy and ecosystems, or bio, and then natural hazards and human impact, which is a number of those interdisciplinary concepts put at the end of the year to sort of make those connections as seen in the cross-cutting concepts. I'm going to focus on Earth's features and natural resources, and again highlight our learning sequence and storyline. As you can see here, we have our essential question: how and why has the Earth's surface changed appearance over time? And I highlight this because it's the next step from the lesson or the unit that Linda just showed you. And so I show that progression in thinking and complexity that the students are expected to experience as they go from one grade level band to the next grade level band. So whereas Linda's essential question is focusing on how the Earth's surface has changed, we're looking at the why it's changed, and then implementing that idea of time into that essential question. The storyline and learning sequence are set up in the same manner. One of the most important pieces for me is to be able to give our middle school teachers an idea of the work that is happening in the elementary school, so all of our learning sequences include a link to Linda's learning sequences from the elementary school grade bands. As Linda mentioned, the inquiry process plays a role in almost every unit that we develop. In this slide, on the upper right, students are seen taking part in an inquiry starter, utilizing very similar materials that the elementary school students utilize. after looking at a real-world phenomenon in class. And in this case, they were looking at a landslide that occurred in California recently. Students are exploring their materials and developing questions that they could utilize to plan and carry out an investigation, looking at factors that play a role in creating these high-speed, high-energy erosional events. Once students have been guided through this process, they are tasked with planning and carrying out an investigation to determine how the changes in the amount of water, steepness of the slope, type of material, or the use of a retaining device may impact the chances of a landslide. So this is an example of students after the inquiry starter sitting down, thinking about the questions, identifying their variables within that investigation, planning their procedure, getting ready to identify specific factors that play a role in a landslide. After the plan has been developed, students will carry out their investigation, collect data, and sit down with their group to analyze that data. Ultimately, the process ends by communicating their results to their peers. That includes an analysis of their data and any new understandings that they have gained based on their own individual investigation. It's the teacher's role to guide these students to relate the results of their investigations back to create a shared understanding of the original phenomena. So the goal in this process is to have a number of different factors that students can synthesize into the role that those factors play in creating a landslide in this case. So I'd like to just end by discussing our continuation to study and what we're doing at both the K-8 and the 9-12 levels. As we continue to develop and implement our curricula at the elementary and middle school level, we're consistently collecting feedback from teachers and students in order to highlight the necessary adjustments and revisions. This is an ongoing process and is occurring as each of our drafts are implemented. Our revision process reflects back to what has happened in the classrooms at each grade level, but also at the changes and revisions that take place at different grade band levels. In addition, our teachers are provided professional development opportunities to help them seamlessly implement the 3 dimensions in their classrooms. Examples of these include unpacking performance expectations to create multidimensional learning objectives and utilizing real-world phenomena to drive both student discussions and building models to describe what they are seeing. At the high school level, there's been a continued study of the impact of our NGSS shifts on the curriculum. We've had multiple focus group meetings with current science teachers to determine staff understandings and readiness, as well as determine expertise already within the department. In addition, conversations in regards to sequence of the DHS science classes and the content that will need to be addressed in each of those science classes have begun with a focus on how to best meet the needs of all of our students. As with teachers in the elementary and middle schools, we continue to provide professional development opportunities focusing on instructional strategies and practices that align with these next generation science standards. Thank you, and we'll now be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Board comments and questions. Mr. Burke?
Thanks so much for the presentation. Kind of going on the last thing you were saying, I'll ask first. As you've gone through the high school and started to have those conversations, focus groups discussing how it is going, what have you learned in terms of how the implementation and of the study has been going?
So looking at our high school sequence, so I think one of the critical pieces that came out of those focus groups are the desire to keep our current sequence of classes for the vast majority of our students, meaning that it became clear very early that there wasn't, that both teachers and administrators maybe didn't have the stomach for wholesale changes in our current curriculum. There are a wide varieties of examples where similar districts have kept their current curriculum and made curricular adjustments within that current structure to meet student needs in terms of the performance expectations. So we foresee in the very near future starting to formalize that sequence, but I don't foresee major changes in the current course sequence.
Thank you.
Mrs. Stein.
I have more of a comment. Thank you so much. This was a lot of work, and having been on the board for a long time, we have been asking for a way to ensure that there's a consistent experience across teachers, different schools, grades. So my hope is that you take this, which I think is exceptional, and roll it up to the high school so that high school students will have teachers will have a similar framework where they can reference what knowledge a kid came in from bio when they go to AP Bio or Chem to AP Chem, and have a framework to follow so there's a consistent experience across sections. I think it's exceptional, so thank you.
Thank you very much, and I can speak to that a bit. One of our sort of behind the scenes processes to create our curricula documents and to understand what students need to learn at each of those grade level bands are based on what are called evidence statements. And so at each performance expectation at the middle school and each performance expectation at the 3 to 5 grade level and the K to 2 grade level, it explicitly states this is where to stop, so that you don't get teachers or classes that go beyond, but it really sets that framework so that it can be alignment both vertically through the grade level bands, but also horizontally across each of those grade level bands.
Thank you.
Any other board comments or questions? Mr. Maroney?
Yeah, I think I have to echo that it's wonderful. As a scientist myself, I love the idea of just diving in and asking why. And one of the professors I had, which still resonates with me today, is he said, too often students focus on the destination, but it's more about the journey than the destination. And I think it applies to math as well. And I was a geek and I loved proofs and geometry because of that. But going back to something you said, which and just as a side, I also read today or yesterday, I don't remember, but that James Comey was a chemistry major, and he was talking about how his chemistry has worked with him to be the former director of the FBI, and the way he went through an investigation and the scientific method and the process, and that was a great asset to him as the director of the FBI. I just thought it was interesting. But my question goes back to something you said, Mrs. Johnson, about the fallacies or the misinformation that students may have about a certain subject. And I go back to the math. One of the things I really like about the Math and Focus was this pre-testing element. Is there something we can do with that in the sciences as well, to have a pre-testing session before we teach a subject to understand, what children are thinking and where they may have misinformation or misguidance?
Could answer that, because our units start the same way. So all of our units begin with a real-world phenomenon, and what the students do is they create a model of that phenomenon. So let me give you an example. So for example, in second grade, our students are engaged in a physical science unit right now where they're studying the properties of matter. And what the big takeaway is that we want students to understand that the material a scientist or engineer chooses to make something is the driving factor. So why are rain boots made out of rubber and not paper? So their unit begins with a student playing in the rain, wearing rain boots. And they draw a model, a scientific model, of the rain boots, the rain, the material that's in that picture, and the teacher will listen in as students are talking about this model, about the phenomenon, within their model, or within that lesson. And that acts as a pre-assessment. Students keep that model, teachers keep the model, and teachers have a choice. Each student could have their own model, they could work in a small group, they could have a whole class model that we contribute to. Think of kindergartners, developmentally what's appropriate for them. And then as new learning occurs, students, teachers go back to that initial model and revise it with new learning. So teachers listen in for misconceptions during that initial lesson, which acts as a pre-assessment. And then every time a student either begins or engages in a lesson, or quite often we end our lessons with what we call a consensus meeting, science talk, it's another opportunity to check in to see if students understood that multidimensional learning objective that we projected. We don't have written pre-assessments at the elementary level. I'm not so sure we would go down that route. We really do want to build students' conceptual understanding of science. As Christian described, the DCIs, disciplinary core ideas, are grounded in conceptual understanding of science. No longer are we asking students to memorize X, Y, and Z, because we know that they hang on to some of it, but not all of it. We want them to walk away with those big ideas. Oh, that we have balls made out of rubber to do this. Oh, we have clothes made out of this because of that. That's what we want our students to understand.
Can I ask a question, Linda and Chris? I mean, it would appear to me in response to Mr. Maroney's question that we probably shouldn't really worry about what kids know and don't know when they enter our schools, because the scientific method, at various levels, is integrated into everything our kids do in science from kindergarten through grade 12. And by employing the scientific method, which enables them to do their own investigations, develop their own evidence, and come to conclusions based on their evidence, obviously at different levels of their development, enables them to come to real understandings that they develop themselves that in many cases are going to be inconsistent with what they may have thought coming into school, but it provides them first with a solid base for continuing exploration and study.
And if I can just add, not necessarily to pre-assessment, but one of the things that is happening in all classrooms as students make adjustments and revise their models, you talked a little bit about metacognition and having students talk about their thinking. It's very important in our classrooms to have the students see those revisions and be able to explain the why. And oftentimes those conversations that students are having with their group or with their teachers are great check-in points to see where they are in terms of their understanding on that specific content. So we've really tried to give our teachers the opportunity to see student thinking by asking our students to explain those revisions as they create their models.
So I'll just echo some of my colleagues' comments. I think this was excellent tonight, and not that math was excellent. We've been spoiled by hearing excellent presentations in math for the past few years, but science, we have eagerly been awaiting, and I think you both did an excellent job tonight. So thank you very much. If there are not any other board questions, Mr. Burke?
I apologize. One question that struck me when you opened the presentation saying how there are these great misconceptions that our students come in with. For my curiosity, could you give me a couple of examples?
God forbid.
The world is flat.
I was actually thinking that one.
Does the sun rise and does the moon set? Where is the moon during the day? Can you see the moon during the day? Is the moon really out there during the day?
Okay.
And is it made of cheese?
Right. And just recently we've been talking about thermal energy and thermal energy transfer in the middle school. And we did just a very short demonstration by putting a thermometer inside of a glove. And over 75% of the 6th grade students in the class said that the thermometer was going to increase, showing that there was an increased temperature inside of the glove itself. And so that's one of those misconceptions that is, when a teacher sees it, they have this big smile on their face because they know that they're really getting to an understanding of what the student currently knows. And it's all, the big thing with the next generation science standards at any level is about moving that student to the point where they can, at the end of that set of lessons, see that same demonstration and effectively communicate why, using those concepts that were part of the instruction, that the thermometer stays the same temperature when you put it into a glove and doesn't increase in temperature.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah,
It's much
thank you.
appreciated and
Thank
great
you.
work for our students.
Our pleasure.
We will move on to poor Mr. Sadlon, who has been sitting in the back there. A discussion and possible acceptance of the contemplated gift for the music department. Dr. Landon and Mr. Sadlon.
Well, we have a really unusually interesting gift tonight to present to the board. It is a remarkable musical instrument, be of incredible help to those students who are studying strings. So I'll let Mr. Sadlon speak to it.
Yeah, Mrs. Ferrante Iqbal, a former resident of Darien, had moved to Chicago and had this exceptionally expensive for our standard for a school to an instrument of over $3,000, and the case and all the really kind of nice accessories, but it's an instrument that we wouldn't normally purchase for students because of the expense, but she was very generous in her donation, and there isn't a whole lot to tell. It's a really nice instrument. We'll probably be keeping it at the high school, and we will not put it in the hands of a beginner or an elementary student, because you know how that ends up.
Don't put it in the hands of
Yeah,
my daughter,
right. But
please.
anyway, that we're very excited to have it, and we have some exceptional musicians at the high school that can definitely benefit by having this instrument in our stable of our inventory. And it's pretty cut and dry, and you can see on here, but it's an exceptional gift, and we really appreciate her generosity.
Are there any board comments or questions? Mr. Burke.
It's a wonderful, wonderful gift. I'm curious, assuming that we take good care of it, which with my kids not taking music, the odds increase. But what are the the life expectancy of a well-maintained instrument like this? Like, how long will we be able to keep it in good working order?
I mean, I can't throw out a number of years, but a long time. I mean, if it's well cared, most of our instruments do last 15, 20 or more years if we take good care of them. And this will be well cared for at the high school level too, and under the guidance of our teachers as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Maroney.
I would just like to echo Mr. Sadlon that Mrs. Virginia Ferrante Iqbal, thank you for your generosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was about to do that after
Sorry.
comments and questions, Mr. Maroney, but I'm glad you did for us this evening. Mrs. McNamara.
Yes, it's an incredibly generous gift. Just to confirm, there were no terms under which her donation was given?
No,
Okay.
she was moving,
Right.
and she knows our orchestra teacher at the high school, and asked them if first if anybody was interested in purchasing it, or and then when nobody really was, she said she'd like to donate it. As a former resident, she was familiar with our music department, and it was very generous of her.
No student. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, there are strings.
There are strings.
Exactly. But
All right. I would very much. We will thank Mrs. Ferrante Iqbal for her gift. But with that, I will entertain a motion to accept the gift as contemplated by Mr. Sadlon. So moved by Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Maroney. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. We hope you enjoy, and please extend our thanks to her.
I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we will move forward to the interim progress report on the 2018-2019 district goals and objectives. I will hand it off to Dr. Landon and his team.
As you know, we worked with the board extensively on developing these goals and objectives early in the school year. We have periodically reported on some of the outcomes of these goals. Here we put together a summary updates of all the things to date that we have done consistent with those goals. We know the board has looked at these, so we're here prepared tonight to answer any questions the board might have on any of these.
So maybe the board's had these, so I don't know that we need to read through them all, but we can just run through curriculum instruction. Is there anything that the board has questions or comments on based on the goals?
Science, math, anyone?
Ready. We're good. We're good. We got a lot of that. Seeing none, we will move on to business. Any questions on the update? Nope. Special education. And community. Any questions for community? Facilities? And technology. For anyone watching, we go through progress reports intermittently, and this is just a regular update. No questions? All right. We will move on. Thank you for the update. And if I can get back to the top of my page, we will really move on. Great. We will move on to discussion and the repeal of Education Policy 4425, Administrative Regulations for the Use and Disclosure of the Criminal Justice Information, and discussion and possible action on proposed Policy 4425, Criminal History Record Information, CHRI, Process Access, Use, and Dissemination Procedures. Mrs. Siam.
So thank you. As the memo stated, in January of 2017, the FBI and the Connecticut State Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection adopted some stringent regulations on how to store criminal justice information for those entities like public schools who are authorized to collect them. So at that time, we had just adopted Policy 4425, which was in compliance. Then the FBI came down with a new model policy. So we did check with Shipman and Goodwin. They no longer prepare a model policy because the FBI requires that we adopt this policy. So we are in compliance with the way we store and dispose of this data. There's a checklist that the state prepares that is based on this policy. So it's just now repealing the old policy, adopting the new one, so the new one reflects what we're now doing and what's required.
Okay, are there any questions on this? So it is Mr. Maroney.
Yeah, my only question is, should we rename the new policy 4425A, or does it just stay 4425?
So we are repealing the old policy, so it
Yeah.
doesn't exist, so it is 4425.
Stays the number.
Okay, just a question.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Yes. So
You know-
may I have a motion to repeal? Are there any other board comments or questions? Sorry, I heard some laughing.
Dr. Landon.
Oh, Dr.
I was just
Landon.
going to say that what we've done traditionally is whenever you modify or replace a policy with something that's similar, we continue at the bottom of each of the new policies or the amended policies, we have a historical trail. So, you know, it states that in 1945 it was policy such and such meant so, and 55 it was this, and so on and so forth. And we can continue to do that.
Perfect.
So may I have a motion to repeal Board of Education Policy 4425 and replace with proposed policy 4425, Criminal History Record Information, Proper Access, Use, and Dissemination Procedures, also known as CHRI. Mr. Burke so moves, seconded by Mr. Deneen. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for your work on that. We will move on to action items, personnel items. Mrs. Siam.
We have nothing.
No PAR this evening. And we will ask if there's any public comment this evening. Y'all are very quiet tonight. A lot of science and math, huh? With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Burke, all in favor? That is unanimous.